Joshua Garcia. He covers boxing for the New York Beacon, and he is always on the boxing scene. And he joins us now to talk about Deontay and the world of boxing. Joshua, welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Twan?
I'm doing good, Josh. So Deontay, he had a fight this past weekend, Saturday night, against Luis Ortiz. That was their second fight now. Now, Deontay won in the seventh round. Now, tell us about the fight. Do you think that Deontay, because from what I hear, Deontay might have lost the fight if it went to the scorecards, but he ends up knocking out Ortiz. So, how about that, and just how about the rivalry between Wilder and Ortiz?
On Saturday night, most people on press row had the scorecard 4-2. They had Deontay Wilder down in the fight come the seventh round. And I had it the same way. I interviewed Bernard Hopkins last week, and I asked him about the fight. And he told me a lot about Deontay Wilder's get-out-of-jail-free card, which, of course, is that right hand, probably the most vicious right hand in the history of boxing. And Deontay used it Saturday night because he needed it. Ortiz came in. He was the more active fighter, which is traditionally in boxing the winner of the fight. Always the more active fighter gets the higher score on the scorecards and the benefit of the doubt, come decision time. And leading into that seventh round, Deontay kind of looked like he did against Fury, where he kind of sat back. He wasn't really the aggressor, and he was trying to pick his moments. But in boxing, when you're sitting back too much, it looks like you're not the aggressor, and that hurts your reputation. And he brought it all back in the seventh round with a vicious knockout to end the night. But he wasn't really impressing too many people round 1 through 6.
And now first, let me get to Wilder's relationship, his rivalry with Ortiz. Now, how did the first fight go, and why do you think that there was need for the second fight?
Basically, the second fight came about because Wilder wanted to put to bed that Ortiz was his most difficult fight, and to honestly put to bed something that I, myself, and a lot of people in the boxing world think, which is if Deontay Wilder doesn't get you out of the ring in the first half of a fight, it's bad news for him. He gets very frustrated. I told Bernard Hopkins, does he look down at his right hand and wonder sometimes, why didn't it work? When he knocked down Fury with the same exact punch that he knocked out Luis Ortiz with on Saturday, Fury rose like, the Undertaker or some type of Michael Myers style villain. And, mentally for Deontay Wilder, he has to look at himself and say, I hit that man with everything I had, and he's standing looking at me right now. So it's deflating for a guy like Deontay,
Okay, so I'm going to get back to that in a second. But Wilder's punch, you said that it may be the most devastating punch of all time. I've heard that too. I was actually talking with a friend of mine who's a former boxer today before I came for the show, and he was talking about all of the all-time power punches, Mike Tyson, Frazier, what have you, and he said that Wilder may have the biggest punch ever to grace the boxing circuit. So, and I heard you say that you may agree. So, what is it about his punch that makes him so devastating?
We were just talking about the 2008 Olympics, and one of the things that you have to take from that is he's the bronze bomber. He didn't win a gold at that Olympics. Deontay, if he had the footwork, if he had the amateur pedigree, if he had some of the skills that the top 5 pound-for-pound boxers, the other top 5 pound-for-pound boxers in the world have, Deontay might be the greatest boxer in the history of the fight game. But Deontay doesn't have that footwork, and he doesn't have some of the skill when it comes to, let's say, defense and, just being composed. If you look at Luis Ortiz and those first 6 rounds. He's very short, he's very composed. He hits you with short little shots that punish you. Wilder kind of throws these overhand rights, these wild uppercuts. He's not very composed. But if you talk, about his right hand, it just erases all of the holes in his boxing game. He can get around all of that with just one shot from his right hand. But when he faces the top echelon fighters, not to say anything bad about Luis Ortiz, but he's not an Andy Ruiz who's been fighting since he was 5 years old, or a Tyson Fury who's been fighting since he was 6 years old. Luis Ortiz is just not that guy. And we'll see coming up if Deontay can put that to rest, that he's, a wild guy and he doesn't have the amateur pedigree of these other guys. We'll see if he can put that all to bed by winning his next 2 fights.
Yes, and so you mentioned Ruiz. He is fighting Joshua coming up soon, one of the other big heavyweights. And Joshua, now he lost to Ruiz not too long ago. Now Ruiz and Wilder have not fought. So could you see Ruiz and Wilder fighting at some point? And in that matchup, do you think that Ruiz could take down Wilder?
Me personally, that's the fight I want to see. Just because we've already seen Fury and Wilder. I really want to see Fury and Wilder again. That's no doubt. We all want to see that again. But I would also like to see a guy holding 4 belts fight the guy who's holding the only other belt in the division, which is the WBC belt that Deontay Wilder has. And if I'm Deontay Wilder, I want to fight the guy who's got the belts, the real belt, not the lineal championship, which is basically a phrase thrown up in the air. But if I'm Deontay, I want to fight the guy with 4 belts so I can unify the division and hold all the belts in the division, rather than taking a revenge match or a unfinished business match, basically. So what I want to see is I do want to see that Ruiz-Wilder fight. If Ruiz were to beat AJ again, I want to see that matchup, only because that has to be the biggest matchup in the division for the pure fact of all the belts are on the line. And if I'm Tyson Fury, I would feel like, okay, I don't really like waiting my turn to get at Wilder again, but if 5 belts are up there, and if I beat that man, I'll hold the unification, then I'll wait for it. That's how Fury should look at it.
Okay, we are being joined by Joshua Garcia, boxing writer with the New York Beacon. All right, Josh, so one thing that you have to clear up for some of us who don't follow the boxing day-to-day the way you do, and you were talking about it, is the different belts. And I know there are, about 2 or 3 different belts in the heavyweight division, I believe. So just, if you could, break down the different belts and why there are these different belts, and who has the belts, and what it all means.
Well, recently there's been the introduction of these franchise belts, which are, in my opinion, an embarrassment for boxing. You don't earn a franchise belt. They just give it to the person they think deserves it. So, me and a lot of hardcore boxing people, we don't even recognize things like that. The belts we recognize are the WBA, the WBO, the IBF, the WBC, and to a lesser extent, the lineal championship, which Tyson Fury has.
Right, so that's like 5 different belts, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so just break down what it all means, because it gets confusing.
Yeah, it does. So basically what happens is, and most people know the history of the 4 belts being in Andy's possession, which is Anthony Joshua beat 3 different individuals to get his titles. He held 4. Andy Ruiz beat him in Madison Square Garden 4 months ago, took those 4 belts from him. The only other belt, physical belt in the division, is the WBC belt, which is held by Deontay Wilder. So they would basically face each other, 4 belts versus 1, and the winner of that would walk away with 5 belts, which would unify the division, meaning one person has all the belts in the division.
Got you. Got you. So before Anthony Joshua lost to Ruiz, he had 4 belts to Wilder's 1. Wow, that's a big difference. So before that fight took place, who do you believe was the better fighter in the heavyweight division, Joshua or Wilder?
Going into that fight, I and everybody in the world, I would guess, definitely thought Anthony Joshua was the better fighter. I mean, you look at his body, you look at his resume, he's beat some really top guys. You know, what he did to Vladimir Klitschko is no joke. You know, Vladimir Klitschko is one of the top names in the history of the heavyweight division. If you talk about the heavyweight division, you have to mention Vitaly Klitschko. There's just no way around it. The man was dominant. He was a Lennox Lewis of his era, you know. And when he lost to Ruiz 4 months ago, it was like Superman falling from grace. You know, nobody expected that. Nobody believed that. Andy Ruiz, essentially a kid out of nowhere, ruined what everybody wanted to see, which was Anthony Joshua against Deontay Wilder. Now, fast forward 5 months later, not many people really want to see that fight. There's a lot of people who want to see Ruiz-Wilder because they think Ruiz just busted open all the holes in Anthony Joshua's game, which is he's only been boxing 10 years, he has no amateur pedigree, and a lot of people think he's just not tough enough for the fight game. You know, Deontay Wilder on Saturday got hit with multiple big shots from Ortiz and stood there and threw that shot in the 7th round that just shocked the world, you know. So Deontay, there's no question about his chin. Ruiz, there's no question about his chin. Fury, of course, there's no question about his chin after taking that right from Deontay and getting up. The only person in the division that's questionable is Anthony Joshua, which makes December 7th so important for him because his entire career and reputation is on the line.
December 7th, in about a couple of weeks, Ruiz and Joshua will go back at it again. Will you be there for that one?
No, I will not be there. I applied for the 90-day visa from the Saudi Arabian government, but I didn't get the approval from work. So I'll be watching that somewhere here in New York with some of the friends.
Yeah, that fight is in Saudi Arabia, and we know it's not easy to do any kind of journalism in Saudi Arabia. So you will not be there at that fight, and it's wild that it's in Saudi Arabia to begin with. Why do you think it's even there to begin with?
You know, I asked Bernard Hopkins this question a few days ago. You know, I made the point of, you know, it really is terrible that a lot of us journalists and hardcore boxing fans are going to miss this fight, because if it was in Europe or anywhere in the United States or the Americas, anywhere, we'd probably all be there. Saudi Arabia, it's a little bit of a tough destination, legality-wise, governmental-wise, but Bernard pointed out to me that these are the type of fights that make careers. You know, the Rumble in the Jungle, the big fight in Tokyo with Buster Douglas and Mike Tyson. These are the type of fights that make careers and that you talk about forever in the history of boxing. And I guess that's something that I failed to, you know, contemplate in my mind was, you know, wow, it really is kind of something different, you know, and they're making a huge deal of it. And Bernard pointed out also, think about how many dignitaries are going to be there, how many presidents of countries, how many diplomats from all around the world, you know. And so I started to think a little different about it. You know, I was a little bit bitter that I'm not going to be there. I would love to be there. So I had a little bad feeling towards it. But after he pointed out all of those positives, I've changed my mind. And I'm more excited than ever about December 7th.
Do you see Joshua gaining back his belts in this fight?
No. I think Andy Ruiz is his boogeyman. I think Andy just has the amateur upbringing that AJ didn't have. You know, when AJ was 6, 7, 10 years old, 15 years old, you know, I can't tell you what he was doing, but I know he wasn't boxing. Whereas Andy Ruiz was in the boxing gym, you know, getting his nose busted, bleeding, having headaches, figuring out how to be successful at his craft, which is what Anthony Joshua never had. If you watch, the Zone just did a really good documentary with Sylvester Stallone on the last AJ Ruiz fight. And one of the things that stood out most to me was when he took those hard shots and he was concussed from Andy Ruiz, he sat down in his corner and he asked his trainer, what did he hit me with? Because he didn't even see it. He didn't even remember it. And he asked his trainers, what do I do here? How do I do this? Well, Andy Ruiz and Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, they have it in their body, they have it in their soul to know what to do in any situation in that ring. Anthony Joshua doesn't have it. And when when Ruiz hits him with combos, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punches, he starts to panic. He starts to breathe heavy. He starts to get anxiety. And once he takes one of those shots, he goes down. And I just don't see any way that he can change that. That's just who he is, and that's just who Andy Ruiz is. And it's a bad matchup for Anthony Joshua.
Okay, and we're almost out of time. Let me ask you, though, so one of Wilder's toughest fight, probably his toughest fight, was against Tyson Fury, and that fight was a draw, right? That was a draw?
Yes.
Okay, so those two are going to be fighting, I know, in about 3 or 4 months. So who do you see coming out on top of that? And if Wilder wins that match, do you see him fighting soon after the winner of Joshua Ruiz too?
So the Tyson Fury fight against Wilder, it went away where if you're the guy who got knocked down twice and came out with a draw, you should feel great about yourself. That's Tyson Fury. If you're the guy who knocked the guy down twice and still didn't get a win, you have to feel terrible about it. And that's Deontay Wilder. So, you know, I wrote about last week with this Ortiz fight that it wasn't Ortiz who had the most to prove, it's Wilder. Because how do you knock somebody down twice, only earn a draw, and then still feel like, you know, you're the better fighter of the two? I get you knocked him down twice. You hit him with everything you had, but he still stood back up, and he still got a draw in that fight. So going into the next fight, if I'm Tyson Fury, I'm feeling very confident about myself, you know, and George Foreman always used to say that, you know, Sonny Liston, and this is crazy to say, that he might have been a better fighter than Muhammad Ali, okay? But Muhammad Ali had the mental aspect that messed with him so much that he became a different fighter. And I think Tyson Fury has a little bit of that with Deontay Wilder. He has gotten his head so much, it has made Deontay Wilder just a little bit less than the Superman that he is.
Okay, so do you think Wilder loses to him second time around?
Yes, I see Tyson Fury as somebody who he's got too much movement for Deontay Wilder.
Okay.
If you look at Deontay Wilder's success in his career, he's very, very successful against one-hitters. Those powerful punchers, just like himself. He's unbelievable against them.
Okay.
But guys who throw combinations, multiple punches, and different angles, he doesn't do that well against them. And that's where Ruiz and Tyson Fury give Deontay a lot of problems. And if the fight were to go, you know, 10, 11, you know, even the distance, Deontay is not going to be the better fighter in those situations. Now, if you tell me the fight with Fury or Ruiz went 5 rounds, I would almost guarantee Deontay was the winner. But if it goes 12, it's questionable.
Okay, Joshua, we got to leave it right there. Thanks again for joining us, everybody. This has been Joshua Garcia of the New York Beacon. Covers boxing for them, writes about all the boxing. So check him out there. Josh, thanks for helping us out and helping us figure out and sift through the heavyweight division of boxing. And we'll have you on again very soon, as we know there's a big fight looming here with Ruiz and Anthony Joshua. Thank you.
Hey, anytime.
All right, so we'll talk to you soon. And folks, that is it for our show today. Thank you for listening, and we will be back with you soon. Peace.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm rocking my peers.